Good morning and welcome to today's virtual training of Coach Session Quarantine Conundrum, allowing ourselves the space to both cope and cry with Jalen Agnew, LCSW, presented by the Connecticut Women's Consortium. The Consortium is a nonprofit organization that is proud to provide cutting-edge continuing education credit to a wide range of behavioral health professionals. We welcome and are pleased to introduce to our trainer today, Jalen Agnew, LCSW. Has been working in the field of social work for over 13 years and received her MSW from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. Working primarily with Hartford youth, her experience includes MDFT and home therapy, work in residential and group homes, work in alternative high school at 28, rehab program, and almost 5 years at the Institute of Living at Hartford Hospital. During her time at the Institute of Living, Jalen worked in the extended day treatment program providing group, family, and individual therapy to Hartford youth of color. In addition, at the IOL, she worked in the dialectical behavior therapy intensive outpatient program, providing DBT groups, family, and individual therapy to adults with borderline personality disorder. Please welcome Jalen Agnew, everyone, and enjoy your training. Thank you.
So welcome to my training. My name is Jalen Agnew. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I currently have a full-time private practice, which is called Knowledge of Self, which is actually my name spelled backwards. As she mentioned, I have been in the field for quite some time. The last position that I did hold, 3 years in child and adolescent and 2 years in adult at the Institute of Living. I also am an adjunct professor and have advanced training in DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, which I will be sprinkling in kind of throughout for everyone. I love being interactive with folks, and I'm going to be asking folks to kind of join in and answer some questions because I understand it's 9 a.m., right? And this is another Zoom call, right? Is everybody else tied to Zoom? I know I am. So I just want to be as open as possible and let's have a great time. So our training today is called the Quarantine Conundrum, allowing ourselves both the room to cope and cry. And the reason I named it that is because conundrum means kind of a problem with no solution. And as we know, 2020 has been a tough year on a lot of us, especially as folks who work in this field, right? And people ask me, how are things going all the time? And my first answer is business did really well, right? Last year, because a lot of people needed extra support. But then there's that piece of how are mental health folks taking care of their own mental health, right? And the reason I said cope and cry is because I want to kind of allow room for both. And I'm going to introduce the idea of a dialectic. Dialectics are two seemingly opposite things that can both be true at the same time. And the reason that is so important is because during this conundrum, right, it's going to be important for us to hold more than one truth so that we can kind of manage through everything that we are going through. Two seemingly opposite things that can be true at the same time. So the example I'm going to give, and this might ring true to folks because most of us are at home, I love my kids and they get on my nerves. Anybody I agree with that one? Anybody? I see smiling and I see smiling on faces. Absolutely. So both of those things can be true and they're seemingly opposite, but we want to hold weight for both of them because what happens when we don't hold weight for both, one or the other doesn't get the emotional attention that we would need. So the thing about dialectics, right? I want to move us away from language around but. So I love my kids, but they get on my nerves, and move us more into a space of and. Because when we use the word and, we're allowing inclusivity in the things that we're talking about. So for the duration of this training, I'm going to be saying no buts. Every time I hear a but or see a but, I'm going to cross it out because we're moving into the space of both and. So we you can hold more than one truth, right? So I love being a therapist, and sometimes I just want to turn off my phone and my TV and mute everything and live in a bubble for a week. And I'm sure folks who work in the field can identify with that and hold space for both of those things being true. So with us holding space for both things to be true, this idea of coping comes up. And when I think about cope, I think about manage, right? We're managing our emotions instead of allowing ourselves to feel them. So the first example I have is when children are young and they fall, what do we say? Don't cry, right? So we're modeling this space of don't cry, pull it together. It's not that bad. Somebody else has it worse than you. So it's not allowing for time of validation of the emotions. And I'm huge in validating of emotions, because as you and I know, a lot of folks in our field are often not validated, or the behavior doesn't allow for the emotion to be validated, right? So I bring up that example to say we start conditioning even children from 1 or 2 to say don't cry, right? I have one of my folks I was working with, and I call the people I work with, I say they have magical minds, because I think honestly anybody with a mental health diagnosis has to be magical to manage in this very neuronormative world. But one of them said to me, I've only seen my mom cry, and I'm cry once, and I'm 35. And I thought about what that means and what that models and what that looks like. I'm a huge believer that energy is a finite resource and emotions are energy in motion, right? So imagine what 30 plus years of held in tears looks like in your body. I'm a huge believer in mind, body, spirit. So if we're holding in emotions, that manifests in other ways. It could manifest as a physical ailment. It could manifest as, increased irritability or being tired. But the fact that we don't allow ourselves to have those emotions is problematic in our ability to move forward and be effective both in our lives and in our workspace. What are some things we learned? And I'm going to start calling on people in a minute. What are some things we learned early about emotions and what that looked like? What did our parents model for us as far as emotions go?
So I have a stepfather. Since I was 4, very angry all the time, angry. My mother never. We have a great relationship now. It took a lot of years of restoration, prayer, healing on my end, and my mother doesn't show much emotion, and I pray a lot for her to let it out. I've only seen her cry a few times in my life, and I'm 37.
Yeah.
And it was now that I'm older, because she was kind of opening up to me about something she was stressing about. But yeah, and then my real father, in and out of always incarcerated, but just like not a father figure, but a great friend to everyone he knew out in the street. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I love the piece of kind of discussing that healing had to take place in the future, right? Because I think I talk a lot with my peers around people from different generations and how they didn't have time for emotion, right? How they didn't have time to slow down and think and feel, right? Is keep your head down and keep moving. And I know, even culturally, it's that keep your head down and moving. I've never known my mom not to have 3 jobs.
Yeah.
All my life had 3 jobs. My grandmother's had 3 jobs. Her grandmother came here from Trinidad and was able to purchase. She got her master's degree and purchased a brownstone in the 20s. So where I come from is get it done, feel later.
Same. But you don't show no feelings, just do it.
Just do it.
Same
right?
It took me a long time. I didn't trust to sit down. Like I feel like I can't show that I'm weak. I have to be strong. Regardless, I have to make it through. I just have to get it done however it is. Just keep going.
Get it done. Absolutely. I see Lori's hand and I saw Sylvia's hand after that.
Yes, good morning, everyone. In my household, as growing up, we've always taught, or it's been dictated to us, that children are made to be seen and not heard. So we didn't have a voice box. We weren't able to speak our emotions, show our emotions, and we had to suck it up. And also, you in our household, what goes on here stays in here. So it was like we had to shut down, and we weren't able to deal with our emotions or how we felt. If I felt like I didn't matter, or how I felt didn't matter. And that, I think I believe now today that had a lot to do with the way I thought, my thought process, how I dealt with people, and how I perceived people.
Absolutely. What you say is huge. Seen and not heard, right? Cultivating a culture of silence to manage emotion. How interesting is that? And also the piece I love too of like, it took me until I was 30 to be like, hey, maybe I should get a therapist if I'm a therapist. Why does that not ring out? Why does that not make sense automatically? Because I've been on automatic until maybe the last 3 years, just trying to manage through everything, right? But it's when you stop that you feel all of that emotion coming up. And we'll get a little bit more into that. I did see Sylvia's hand as well.
So good morning, everyone. And it's just a blessing to hear this conversation. My memoir is coming out this year. I had a right to remain silent. Can you hear me now? I've worked on this project for the last 5 years, but I grew up in a household where I didn't see emotions. Most of my family was from the South, migrated here for jobs, and I didn't meet my mom until I was 3 years old. And I saw love in some ways. It was a very dysfunctional house, but I saw love, clean clothes and food on the table, but I didn't hear the word I love you. And there was no embracing of emotions and I purposed myself with my 6 children that we have that relationship, but I didn't know how to embrace that in my world of relationships in and outside the home. When my girlfriends would hug me, I go, I like, don't, or people would just embrace. And I would look at people like, you're weird. Like, why are you reaching your hand to extend a handshake to me? Or, and I would see other folks say I love in other homes. And I'm like, something's wrong here. And so I purposefully do that with my children, especially when you're working in the field and for a long time. And I'm telling people what they should do when in fact, I'm just as broken as ever in my own life, but I use that as mask so I didn't have to deal with my issues. And so it's a balance, it's a weight to carry around. And after a while, the weight just collapses on you until you're like, I got to do something about this, or I'm not going to have a healthy relationship with myself and others. So yeah, I didn't see it or experience it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, come on, memoir, you better, come on.
Yes, publish it. We working for a release date. So yeah.
Let us all know. And I love this conversation around balance, right? And even the concept of love. For a lot of parents, love means providing physical things. So food, you got a roof over your head. I don't understand why you're depressed, right? This way of managing emotions is to provide in a very physical way, but then our mental, emotional, and spiritual needs are very often not met. And then here we come into this field trying to be healers for other people. So I think that insight and that kind of looking in the mirror piece is huge when we're talking about the dialectics of this conundrum and what we have to manage through. And to what folks are saying, I always say it's a gift and a curse to be high functioning, because you get up and you get somewhere and you look good and your edges are laid. Hello, can we talk about that? Your edges are laid. And then inside there's a war going on, but nobody knows about it. So that they don't even think to ask you, are you okay? Right? We don't even think to ask for help because we were told, don't ask for help, don't ask for food, don't let anybody know what's going on in this house, like we talked about. So it's really cultivating that space of inner turmoil that we kind of sit with. And I think the oldest person I work with is 60, and really her talking about being 60, getting there and finally being able to kind of process through emotions that she hasn't in a long time. So it's super important to be able to do that. Anything else about what we're talking about as far as this emotion piece goes and the dialectics? And I can't see hands because there's so many screens. So if folks could just kind of chime in, that'd be great too.
I just want to say that as I got older, I started to see where like the anger that my stepfather had was coming from his childhood and how he was abused and how he never let go of that pain. So I would tell him now as an adult that I'm not afraid. I'm like, you really need to let that go. His father passed away. He's still angry. He still hasn't let it go. And I'm constantly telling him, you got to let that go. You're only hurting yourself. But I'm just, he's tough. He's tough. He's one that you can't really break through. So I pray a lot for him. And then as well as my mother, I started to hear little things about my grandmother, which I was always with. I was always around her. So I never saw a bad side, to her. But my mother never spoke of her childhood and how she didn't feel loved. And then it all came together to me of why, they were the way that they, why she is the way that she is. And then again, through my healing, I start to like send her messages and stuff like that, and I see it working little by little.
And I love what's being said there in the chat. It's more acceptable to express happy emotions. And most, folks I come across, they know angry and sad and happy, and not the range of things kind of going on in between. So it's super important to be in touch with that. So the next concept I want to kind of introduce is, and this is one of my theories, just bear with me, being and doing, right? So a lot of times we are in both spaces at once, and we need to be clear about what space we're in so that our body and mind could know how it needs to participate. So what I mean by that is when you are doing, there is an expectation. There is a time frame or productivity or something that needs to be done in the doing. We assign meaning to the things that we are doing. So that's task, any task we're going to complete. Being is not assigning meaning to things and just observing. And in a lot of the mindfulness talk that's going on now, which is a buzzword, but it's super important because in the being, you're just observing the things that are going on around you. And I don't think that we are taught that skill ever. We are taught multitasking. We're taught go, go, go. Even if you look at the length of a school day, I mean, we're cultivating a culture of go, 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 go. And there's never a culture of kind of be. What does being even look like? So for me, I think being could be just sitting in silence. Anybody enjoy silence? Anybody have access to silence? Let's say that, because I know a lot of us are in the home and with kids running around, there's not a lot of silence. So that could be sitting in silence. That could also be listening to music or dancing. It could be anything that you don't really have to participate in with your brain, but you're allowing your mind and your body to be in a space that you don't have any expectations of what comes out of it. And I think that what I want for you all, and if anybody has pen and paper, I want you to write down doing, and being. And I want you to get in the mindset of whenever you're doing something, whenever you're engaging in something, you need to talk to your brain about where that's coming from. So if it's a doing act, you need to be fully involved. If it's a being act of letting things kind of go on around you. Anybody into meditation or yoga? Yes, no? I see some nods there. I see some no's. Okay. So one of the things I love too about DBT is when I first learned DBT, the first module of DBT is mindfulness. And my coworker said to me, if you teach mindfulness, you have to have a mindfulness practice, right? And I was like, wait, I have to use these skills in my actual life in order to be a good practitioner at, So the mindfulness practice is huge on how do I let my nervous system calm down after a full day of work? How do I allow my body to know that it is safe? I'm not sure if you know, I'm probably sure you do. A lot of us are being traumatized and re-traumatized every day working in this field because we're hearing stories and helping people and fixing problems that could either bring up some old trauma within us or introduce us to lifestyles that we couldn't even have imagined. So we are dealing with trauma on a daily basis. And what happens in the body with trauma? Shoulders. Where's everybody's shoulders right now? Are they up? I have to remind myself at least twice a day to put my shoulders down and breathe. And people say breathing, that's common sense. It actually isn't, because the first thing to go when you have an intense emotion is you hold your breath. And what that does to the brain is it slows down the process. So being intentional about slowing down. Somebody said it was hard to learn how to stop. I'm actually teaching people how to stop, which is an interesting part of our culture, but it's something that we do not do. And we actually kind of brag about hustle culture. Anybody see that? We brag about how many jobs we have. We brag about the fact that we're burned out. And I want to switch the narrative to that hustle is a trauma response. Hustle is a trauma response because it could stem from a financial insecurity that happened in our past or something that we've seen happen to folks who are not hustling. I learned the only way to survive is to hustle. But then I started thinking about it. Wealthy people don't hustle. Wealthy people don't overly work themselves. So if the goal is wealth, hustle is not the way in which to get there. So what are we thinking about this being and doing, and this idea of hustle as a trauma response? Does that bring up anything for anyone?
I think the hustle, because we see so much of the transition of a technology world where you have so many options to go into different windows of things, and the perception, it's a perception that people think that people got it going on, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and it looks, appealing, and this energy that's out there. But you also, the same amount of that stuff that you see being sold in your face, the same amount of rate of suicide, depression is still going up too. And so people find a false sense of being. For me, I had to learn how to pause, and it's required. I can't function. And now I'm just telling myself at the age of 56, I was going to say 55, but I'm 56. I function on a calendar. And through therapy, I had to learn how to pencil myself in, which means if green and yellow keep saying that's something else, my red better be somewhere in my calendar. Like after a certain day or time of the day, I'm not doing anything else for anybody else. And I'm taking some time for me. Like I have to pencil myself in my calendar because there's so much going on. If it's church, I'm sorry. If it's work, if it's ministry, if it's the children, I have to take that breather for myself. I had to learn how to do that I thought I was unstoppable. I thought, I was a single mom, 6 children. I can save the world, when I realized I wasn't Superwoman. And I was not in that we're going to save the day movement. I had to realize, nope, that's not me, because it was destroying me at the same time. So we've learned, but even if it's just to come home from work and just turn the television on to Netflix, or just hear music from Alexa, that's my way of winding down. And I don't let anyone take me through that. My kid, oh, you acting old. Or why you not? Well, okay, you call me that. But I had to demand it for myself. I had to learn how to do that, which refreshes me to be able to endure the stories that I'm hearing. And the people who come with these long problems and say, I'm not listening to what you're saying, I'm listening to what you're not saying, and be able to make recommendations based on that and not getting caught up in their world. Because that's the easy invite for my past drama, is to go there with them, but just saying, okay, I'm listening to what they're not saying, and I'm going to offer some solutions to this atmosphere, and I'm not going to save them because I'm not Superwoman. So Absolutely. These are all things that I had to learn.
Yep. And I love that concept of Superwoman. And what you talk about with social media, I saw a bunch of posts of, if you don't come out of this pandemic with a side hustle, then you're not working hard enough. And just that mindset of, so you want me to manage a worldwide trauma, plus my family trauma, plus my internal trauma, plus the trauma of people I work with, and still put productivity first. It's almost backwards of like, at what point do we stop and say, we all went through a collective worldwide trauma last year, right? And people are like, just to get back to normal. What is normal? What is this new normal going to be? And how can we cultivate spaces where we're coping and crying with whatever this world looks like in the next step? It's already May. I don't know how that happened. It's already May. We're already halfway through 2021. And I think a lot of us are coming off the fumes of 2020, kind of trying to figure out how to move forward with what that looks like. And speaking to the trauma of work, I worked at a group home. Is one of my first jobs out of grad school. I worked at a group home and was on call 24/7. So when I hear that ringtone, that was 10 years ago. When I hear that ringtone, I have a trauma response. So just thinking about how much trauma we're exposed to on a daily basis, and how it manifests in things that we do if we're not able to dispel that. So I want to talk about transitions. Transitions are super important to what I said before, making sure your nervous system is calming down. If your nervous system, and we know this, right? We read this and we learn this. If your nervous system is in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze, we never have a chance to rest. So has anybody experienced being exhausted and still not being able to sleep? That's because the nervous system has not yet calmed down. And that's why I think transitions are helpful, right? Because in a conundrum, there is no answer, but transitions can be helpful of, Let me inform my brain that I am getting ready to enter a space where I'm just being. So whatever that looks like for you, it could be switching rooms. It could be changing clothes. It could be certain music. What you're really trying to do is connect the brain to the idea that it is safe, because we're talking about safety, emotional safety. It is safe for you to slow down. Because as we know, sometimes it's not safe for us to slow down at work because we have 5 other crises to manage, right? So these transitions are really telling our body it's safe to transition into being. That could be a shower, that can be smells, whatever that looks like for you. Anybody have a transition that they kind of engage in every day just to let their brain know that we're entering into a new space of being?
When I wake up in the morning, Alexa and I have become very good friends. I just learned yesterday, because I like the daily bread. And I just said, Alexa, read daily bread for today. And it goes into the audio, because sometimes I can't read it myself, the audio voice. I was like, oh my God. So it does it for me. And then I'll do a Pilates and a thigh exercise.
Yep.
Because that's the quietest moment of my day, is when I first wake up. Once I start engaging in a text message, a phone call, email, I have left my space of peace and enter into this world of communication. And I don't get that back until really the next day, unless I wind down. Because I used to, like, if I hear a pop on my phone, email, this is something therapeutic my therapist is working with me on, is when I hit a ding, I got to answer it. The text, I'm a response person right away, because I feel like if I don't do it, I'm going to miss out. And so now what I'm doing lately is I'll do a few things, but I'll turn my phone on dark night mode. I noticed that the color makes a difference for me. I'll turn the television off at a certain time, and I'll put rain sounds on to allow myself to get in a sleep mode. And then I just look at it hurts. Oh my God, you don't know how hard this is for me to see the emails that are waiting for me, like 2, then it goes to 3. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to answer. I need to answer. It's so hard because I want to be efficient. I like to be efficient, but I realize what's is going to hurt if I don't answer this email at 8:00 at night. They should have sent it to me earlier. And then when I get up the next day, I'll start answering, unless it's something that I feel I really need to do. Then I'll even voicemails, but it's not easy. But I'm trying to get there. I'm working on that.
Yeah. And I saw somebody in the chat say, turning off your work phone and walking away from it. You know, running a private practice, that was one of the hardest things at first, is my phone ringing all the time and not knowing if it was business or leisure or family. And eventually I got a second phone, but then that second phone is always on my side and I'm always looking at it. So it really is separating that during your transitions of brain, you're safe now. Brain, you can slow down now. I'm in my home office right now. End of my day, I physically get up from my home office and move into the living room. That's me signaling to my brain, you're now in a being space. You don't need to be in fight or flight mode. Showers are also really great transitions because you're using more than one coping skill. You're using the shower, you're using the temperature, and you're using feeling and touch and smell. So it's engaging more than one of your senses, which are the best coping skills. You want to engage more senses than one in coping skills that really, really help you with the transition. So coming into a space of ease into your day and wind down at night. And I know it is very tempting, like you were saying, to turn that email off or just answer that email. And, you know, it'll be 2 a.m. and I'll be like, first of all, why is so-and-so up at 2 a.m.? But let me read this, right? Somebody's in a different time zone and it's their 9 a.m. and they're sending you something. But it's having that boundary, and I'm going to get into boundaries next, of what space am I in? And I want you all to hear my voice in your head. All my folks tell me they hear my voice in their head. I want you to hear mine as well. What space am I in right now? And we'll talk about mindful mantras a little bit at the end. What space am I in right now? Am I in a being space or am I in a doing space? And allow your brain to act accordingly once you have that incorporated into your day. Another piece for that is boundaries. And it's a buzzword. Everybody says it. But what we're really protecting with boundaries is our emotional safety. Now, with boundaries, People think boundaries are only for telling someone no, but boundaries are also within yourself, within your home, within what your day looks like. So really being clear with yourself of here's my work hours, here's where I'm off, here's the time I'm engaging with people, here's the time that I'm not, so that your brain can really get into a process of what that looks like. Boundaries is huge because as providers, a lot of us are givers and we want to help and we want to be helpful. But then we realize that we are exhausted all the time. It's because we're constantly exerting energy. Like I said in the beginning, energy is a finite resource. Energy is a finite resource. So if you do not replenish the energy, you're literally giving from an empty space. And I'm not going to give the cliche example of the thing that comes down in the plane. You got to put it on yourself first and then the other person. But you get that concept of if you're not replenishing your energy and finding ways to do that, then you're constantly going to be exhausted. Not only that, and here's my behavioral therapy brain coming in, you're teaching people that your boundaries are not important to you. So we have to make sure we keep our boundaries strong. And that's with work. Hello. That's with family. That's with friends. That's with ourselves, right? Boundary to myself of I'm not answering that email. I'm going to watch the 16th episode of Game of Thrones. Yes, I am a Game of Thrones person. It's amazing. But really being clear with ourselves about what our boundaries are. Another thing I say too around boundaries is if it is a tough boundary to set, have your language already prepared for what that looks like. So what I mean by that is, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that right now. I am not available for this. And having the language down, so one, and here's the DBT, you're modeling what that looks like. You're also letting the person know that you're holding strong to your boundaries. How many times have we said to our jobs, no, I can't get that done, I don't have the time, but then took the work home and did it anyway, right? So holding strong to your boundaries helps you maintain and manage your emotional safety. So boundaries, what do we think about boundaries? How do people maintain their boundaries? And how do you introduce boundaries to other people? My free time does not mean I'm available. I don't know if people have awareness around that. Because I'm free, that doesn't mean I'm available to engage with what other people want me to engage in. I have to be protective of my time. Absolutely, boundaries are important in the chat there. I think another piece about boundaries is when you set them, you're also letting the other person know how much you are going to engage with them or not engage with them. So that's super important for you to do. Boundaries could be separating some time for yourself. What phrase do you need to use with your children when you need 10 minutes? Mommy time,
My children are adult. They're adult. It's my 6 children are all adult. One is home. And I decided to send them a group chat text and explain to them what's going on in my life. The book is wrapping up. I'm working doing different things. And I said, I love you all. You're very valuable to me. You're doing great things. But if you don't hear from me, if I don't pick up the phone, just know that I'm working towards a goal and I love you all, of these emojis, so that folks, they don't start taking it personal. I'm not picking up my phone, just explaining the moment that I'm in. Because sometimes they call, oh, I can't touch you right now. I'm going to Zoom in, this and that. So just explaining where I'm at. And then, we'll have some time together soon. Because sometimes they take it personal. Oh, you don't have time. And that boundary you set, you be feeling like, oh my God. And you try to create something that you just can't even commit to. So I just decided to send out group chats, checking in, and stuff like that. And it's been working, maybe not for my daughters, but for my sons, it works so far.
Absolutely. And you said something of sometimes people get upset and take it personal. That will happen. But I always tell people I would rather be upset. I would rather you be upset with me than for me to be upset with me, because now I don't have energy to do the things I need to do. So really setting those boundaries across the board and practicing, right? If it's tough for you, because I know a lot of givers have a hard time with boundaries, practicing it on little things. And also boundaries with the folks we work with. I know some of the folks we work with are super engaging and you want to help, but those boundaries have to be clear as well. for our own, like I said, emotional safety. Anything come up with boundaries, or anybody struggle to set boundaries?
I want to say now that you asked that, I did struggle with setting boundaries in the past for a long time. My husband and I are involved in several, programs at the church, and we have 6 children. So, it's kind of hard to not say, it was hard for me to say no. But over the last few months, and even being in this program, I had learned, to kind of like being on Zoom all day too, and people wanting to FaceTime me right after work. And it was like, okay, I can't do this. So I started communicating with people. Like there was a family member that if I wouldn't pick up, they'd call me 6 and 7 times. So one time I just picked up and I said to him, listen, is it an emergency? What exactly is going on? It was just to have a conversation. So I said, listen, I'm not available. When I'm not at work, I have to either be, attending to my children, or they're first, and myself as well. So I just can't do it. So I had to just communicate. And I started telling people, like, after a certain time, if it's not an emergency, don't call me, don't text me. It's just, yeah.
I agree. And even when you bring up the example of church, right? You want to do that. You want to give. But then if you have nothing left for the next day, it's that kind of that robot mode of being on E all the time and existing on fumes, which we're all experts in. But it's going to be super important for us to be experts in operating out of a space where we do have energy because we were able to set those boundaries. And sometimes it's the most difficult with people we love, right? Because we often don't want to offend the people we love. At the same time, those are the most important people to set boundaries with, because they're probably used to having so much access to you that when you set that boundary, it's going to be confusing. And you might have to repeat your boundary more than once because people are going to push. But one thing I learned about humans in my whole behavioral therapy brain is humans are going to test your limits always. It's not only children that are testing, it's everyone that's testing your boundaries. So making sure you're holding on to those and being serious about them. And anytime you let a boundary slip or shift, you're teaching that person that your boundaries are not clear and concise, and they're going to continue to kind of shake that for you. And we've all seen that happen where you give a little and then you're giving a little bit more and then a little bit more. And before you know it, you're like, why is my plate so full? And only 1/3 of what's on my plate is mine, right? One of the folks I work with said, I carry all this weight. I carry all this weight from other people, but I make it look good. And the statement sounded good at first, but then I was like, why are we carrying other people's weight? Why are we carrying other people's trauma, right? We're walking around picking up trauma and weight off the floor. I'm pretty sure we have our own that we don't need to pick up extra, right? So really having those boundaries with folks. My mother gets mad at me sometimes because I can't answer, but that's what I have to do for myself, because if I don't replenish, I'm not going to be good for the whatever amount of sessions I have for the day. It's funny because I was talking to my cousin yesterday about this training, and I said, the training is around self-care and taking care of yourself. My cousin said, oh, good. That means you don't have any sessions for the rest of the day, right? And I was like, no, I got 6 sessions. She said, oh, so you're teaching people about self-care, but you're not doing it yourself. Okay. And I was like, there's that message of like teaching it, right? And not incorporating it and making sure that it's super, super clear to other people. I'm learning how to set boundaries with the people we work with. Yes, absolutely. Especially at work, we feel like we have to say yes a lot, especially if it's a supervisor or manager. We feel like we have to say yes a lot. And it comes down to, I cannot complete the duties within my job description if you're giving me additional duties. And I know that sounds better than it is, right? I have worked before, and I do know that the pushback is kind of, well, it needs to get done. And at the same time, really practicing of setting boundaries with your work. Has anybody been successful in setting boundaries at work? And what did that look like for you?
My comment was really mainly geared towards the people we work, like serve. Like it's a crisis counselor.
Yeah.
People have legitimate and valid reasons why they need something right away, but that puts pressures on. And again, I just use the superwoman syndrome, like, oh, I need this, and that. And I said, I understand that. But what I try to do is transition them to advocacy, helping yourself, not calling everybody, giving you the number, the resources. And unless someone's really, really in a very extreme circumstances that I need to push a little harder. But other than that, saying, I'm going to get back to you in 3 days. I'm going to get back to you a week from now, instead of saying, I'm going to call you right back later today. I'm going to call you back tomorrow. And that puts more pressure on me. I had to learn how to set some realistic time frames so that people are not waiting in the wing about, she said she's going to call me back. Now they're calling me. And not telling people, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to solve your problems. That's just not who I want to be anymore. Back in the day when I had the strength and stuff, I'm calling everybody, making it happen, but it burnt me out really bad. So I try to give people those, unless it's in extreme circumstances, give them that time to be able to use the resources we have provided for them, and kind of figure it out themselves, unless I need to intervene if there's a snag along the way. So that's the boundaries I'm talking about, like the people we work with, not the magic wand, I'm going to do it for you, because that really, really puts pressure on. So
absolutely makes sense. And again, the same way of when you set the boundary, folks might get upset. I've been fired as a therapist for not answering my phone, past 10, 11 o'clock. But I state very clearly in my paperwork and in sessions, I'm available from, whatever times I'm available. And if it is not an emergency, I'm not going to respond. So that's super important, that we're setting boundaries around social media. Hello. I'm not going to ask who has a social media issue or addiction. We're just going to leave it right where that is. But making sure we are very aware or conscious of how much time we're spending on social media, because that also, we think we're scrolling and being, but the scrolling is more of a doing, because you're taking in so much information, and then the comparisons start. And all of those things, I wish I was there, or look at what this person is doing. So making sure you have boundaries around your social media. So boundaries are going to be really, really important when we're talking about coping. The next piece I want to talk to is about our physical, taking care of our physical bodies. I feel like one of the first things that go when we're overwhelmed is us paying attention to our physical selves, right? Because we get into that robot mode, we get into the go, go, go mode, and we're operating off of fumes. So I feel like one of the first things to go is taking care of our physical health. Are we eating? Not even eating properly. Are we eating? I remember those busy days scarfing down a yogurt in my car before I went into the home, because I did in-home for 3 years. I remember not being able to, because I had so much back to back. And then at night being so exhausted and hunger, and choosing between exhaustion and hunger. Are we taking care of our physical selves, and are we getting what we need to eat? What is that looking like for us? And then I know too, when you're on the go, you're grabbing something that may or may not be healthy. And it works in that moment, but how is that replenishing? How is that adding to the fuel? Another piece of it is doctor's appointments. When's the last time you went to the doctor for a physical? When's the last time you checked up on this? One of my folks told me they had something on their foot for the last 3 years. And I said, well, did you get it looked at? No, it'll be all right. I'm fine. It'll be okay. Getting those things checked out. Because one thing about taking care of our physical, you might be able to do something or take something that will improve that thing for you. So paying attention to what that looks like as far as doctor's appointments go, and seeing a specialist if you need to. Because if our bodies are not moving, none of the rest of the parts can move, right? Anybody struggle with taking care of their physical health, or realize they need to kind of lean more into that? And I'm not talking about dieting or eating healthy. I'm talking about taking care of your physical self, of eating, getting rest, making sure that you feel good in the morning, taking a little bit of extra time to breathe and drink water. Anybody struggle with the physical part of it?
I had an incident. This is years ago, and I realized I was in trouble. This is a little disclose. I'm going to say a little peekaboo in the book. I ran so much with community work, working full time, managing my children, and I didn't pay attention. I had a little pain, but didn't pay attention. And I don't eat Haagen-Dazs butter pecan ice cream to this day because of this incident. One night I went to sleep during Hurricane Sandy. I had some fried chicken and Haagen-Dazs, and I woke up violently sick. My daughter called the ambulance and went to the emergency room, and they had to do emergency surgery. The doctor came in and said, you have 8 large gallstones that need to be removed. And I depleted my electrolytes. I had to be infused with electrolytes, and they had to take those out. Now, mind you, before that, I was having seizures in my sleep and didn't even know it. Well, that came later. I was not paying attention to my body. It was onset. It came quickly. It happened, and I still wasn't listening. And I was like, well, why didn't I have pain? Why didn't I wasn't having pain? But I was not listening. That something was there, but I was not paying attention, and it cost me. I had to have surgery and have them all removed. And the doctor, I remember my follow-up visit, he said, how could you have been walking around with these almost golf-size gallstones? 8 of them I removed. I had to take the whole gallbladder and not know. You need to start paying attention to your body. And I still didn't learn then. But it was a start of a pre-wake up call, but that came later. And I think because I ran so much, trying to do everything, be the superwoman that was a figment of my imagination, that I just wasn't paying attention to it. And so when I look back saying, oh my God, like, you don't slow down, because you're 5 different people to everybody. And then there's you, and that's the last person, and the impact happens on your body. It's brutal. So
Absolutely.
that was a almost deadly lesson for me.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not something we wake up and say, I'm going to ignore this today. It's one of those things where you keep going and you notice the pain, but you keep going because things have to be done. And what happens sometimes with that too is numbing, right? So I'm sure everyone knows last year, especially in 2020, substance abuse has kind of raised to the roof of people trying to cope and manage with everything that's going on. So really paying attention to, are we overusing anything to help us manage our moods or help us get energy to do anything else? And paying attention to that. And that's not a judgmental thing. I'm talking purely from a physical standpoint of, is what you're putting in your body replenishing your energy or taking more of it away? And that's super important to pay attention to as well, because now we're talking about how your sleep is going, how it interacts with medications if you're on them, those kind of things. So be paying attention to, did doing that thing once a week turn into 3 times a week, turn into 5 days a week to cope with the day? That's going to be really, really important for you to pay attention to. And I'm going to go right ahead and include caffeine in there, because I've seen people, drink 6 cups back to back just to manage through the day. We're going to throw caffeine in there as a substance as well. We got to be paying attention to that, because here I am with 6 cups of coffee and I can't sleep. Now I'm not getting replenished, and the cycle continues and continues. So be paying attention to what that looks like also. And then there's the moving your body. I don't even like the word exercise because it just annoys me, because I'm working on it myself, right? Of just moving, stretching. I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes working in the home, you're kind of in one place for a long time. And where I used to get up and go out and go to the office and take a walk and do this and that, I'm kind of sedentary now. So it's really paying attention to, have I moved my body today? Have I seen the sun today? Have I been outside to have a fresh breath of air? Those things are going to be super duper important to incorporate into your coping and managing with this conundrum we're talking about. So the next thing I want to kind of mention is taking care of your mental health. I tell people all the time, Anna, you have your hand up. Is it Anna or Anna? I apologize.
Either way.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say that in the beginning of the pandemic, I had a lot of anxiety about being home. I have 5 children. My husband got laid off, so there were 7 of us. And then I learned, I guess, how to deal with it and slow down, because I didn't have a choice when everything else was taken away from, what we were doing. And then I got this job. And like you said, like, I never had a job that I've had to sit in front of a computer. I've always been very active. So, because of my health and weight, my husband and I started to eat healthier and do exercise. For me, 30 minutes a day at the gym is good. At least I'm doing something. Yep. And I noticed a huge change in my mental health. The anxiety started to go away. And then it goes along with like what you said. I realized I don't have to be at everything. I don't have to say yes to everything. Like I'm okay with, I do work from home and I do have two little ones. I still put them in daycare. Like I can't have them here and work. Even though back in the days I probably would have said, yeah, I'll save money, I'll keep them home. Now it's like I need this time for me. But the everyone says like when you start to eat healthy, it changes your mental health. It does work. We completely eliminated certain things, and I saw a huge change in my mental health as well as physical. Although I would love to see faster results, because with the men it's so different. He's like shedding all these pounds, and for me it's taking a little longer. And he's like running on the treadmill. For me, I'm like 30 minutes is good. I'm just trying to be consistent right now. I'm not running, but I have lost 21 pounds. But because I'm looking, I was looking at the numbers, I was writing them down, but I wasn't really, because I was so focused on what I haven't lost yet. I was like, wait a minute, I already lost 21 pounds. Like, that's great in 2 months or whatever. So, but yeah, it does help a lot with the mental health side.
Absolutely. And it's something we overlook. And like I said, it's usually the first thing to go. But it is very true, right? Because if we think of the replenishing ourselves, then food is fuel, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're putting in fuel that doesn't replenish the body, then all we're doing is consuming things and not really getting the nourishment that we need. And, usually sometimes your physical body is all that you have control of, right? So your emotions might be in one space, your work might be in one space, your family life might be in one space. Your physical body, sometimes that's the only thing that you can manage or have 100% control over. So if you can invest in that, I have a person I'm working with who's going through some really trying time, and we're just working on her physical stuff because everything else is out of her control. So making sure she gets the nutrients to her body. But that is super important. And that's going to lead me into taking care of our mental health. And I always say to folks, I am a Black therapist with a Black therapist. And I don't see any shame in sharing that, because doctors have doctors and dentists have dentists. So why wouldn't I have a therapist? And I think it's really important when we're investing in, the field that we're in work-wise. It's super important that we're investing in that in our own lives. So really looking at finding a therapist for yourself. And I know it was difficult for me because I do work in the field and have a lot of connections, but I decided it was way more important for me to work on that part of myself, because that is a part of my overall health. So if you don't have a therapist, get one. And, therapy is not for everybody, but it really, really helps with unpacking some things, especially that generational stuff, right? And one thing that I've found both in my work as a therapist and with my therapist, a lot of my trauma is generational. And a lot of it's cycles and repeating the same behaviors of people I've never met, which is so interesting about the brain. So really taking care of that. And that goes in with the boundaries, that goes in with taking your space and transitioning. Taking care of that mental space is going to be huge when you're talking about coping and managing through this conundrum. Anybody take extra time working on their mental health or been investing in it lately? Do you feel any different about it?
I was in therapy now and it took a long time for me because, as a Christian woman, sometimes we do find a Christian counseling and people in our churches. But for me, it took me to go outside of what I was used to and find someone who didn't know me, but I too was looking for someone who could understand my culture and who did understand my principles of what I believed in. It took a long time because the stigma attached to it, what goes on here, stays here. We don't need therapists, just suck it up, and I went against the grain. And one of the things that I've been benefiting from, because if you do work like this, I've been in this field for 33 years, helping people in the community. You will have no other choice at some point to deal with your own issues. Because after a while, you can only hide behind so many people. And the one thing that I did learn, because I too, generational things too, that's in the book, but I had to understand. I'm the type of person, I have to understand why. If 1 + 1 is 2, I need to know what the 1 and the 1 is. Why is it 2? And so I was able to understand why things happen so that I cannot personalize them so much to move towards my healing. And there were some things that I may never get the answer to, but I can understand not to repeat the cycle and understanding who I was. Who am I? My identity is very important for me because I'm a type of person, like I want everybody to get along. I want people to like me. They just got to like me. I'm a nice person. And now I'm past that point. You know, if you have an issue with, then as long as I didn't do anything to offend you, then that's your issue. And so, but I love people. I love my community, but I was broken. And in order for me to help broken people, I had to now learn that, you know, girl, you got to go get fixed yourself. Because this is it. I wish I could take this out. You know, I take off my watch or my jewelry at night. I wish I could cut the skull open and take this brain, this thought process, and sit it on the nightstand. That's just not reality for me. So I can rest. And I needed mental rest. And in order for me to find mental rest, I needed someone to help look at the pieces on the table. But that also came with accountability. I had to own my stuff too. The things that I had to be accountable for. And that was hard. And I'm still on that healing journey. But I never thought I could be where I am today. And I'm still in the process of I haven't arrived yet, but I have already spelled A and now I'm on the R, the first R and arrived. So it is a long journey, but it is so peaceful that what I can allow in my space and accountability, going back, making what I've done right. And it brings me some peace, you know, and how I just see things. And so it's helping. It has helped. And also, too, when people come to me who are broken or we're helping someone, I don't make them feel like, oh, you don't need that. No, I embrace that for them. I don't tell them that they need to do that. It's a one decision. But I also let them know that there is help out there for you. And if that's something you're thinking about, you should explore it.
Absolutely. And I agree with the stigma and the myths of, there's a lot of myths around how much therapy costs or being outside of people's means, but you know, a lot of insurance does cover therapy, and you know, Medicaid therapy is absolutely free, no out-of-pocket costs. So really being educated and educating others around, you know, it's okay to unpack things. And I remember the first time I went in to unpack some of my stuff, and the woman looked at me like, "And you're still functioning?" I'm like, "What? That's everybody don't know." She's like, "No, that's let's unpack it." So really being able to look at yourself in the mirror, and to be honest, therapy can get very ugly. I tell people all the time, it is not cute. You will not wake up one day and be, you know, floating around. It is some tough work. It is some really going into some dark spaces, and and when you clean out those dark spaces and allow the light in, the sun in, it makes it that much more it makes coping that much more of a thing that you can do. And I did see your hand up again about mental health. No. Okay. And the last piece I want to add to is your spiritual health. So I've had 2 of my folks today say, well, I noticed that when I'm taking care of my spiritual health, my mental health is better. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm totally, whatever spiritual practices you have, it doesn't matter as long as you're engaging with them, right? Throughout your day or throughout the week, that's going to be the important piece of it. And you can get very creative around what your spirituality looks like. You just need to invest in it, because the spirit also needs to be replenished and to be fed. So that goes into the mind, body, spirit part. Where I want to kind of start slowing down is when we're seeking support. Now, I don't know about you all, but I have one friend who will hype me up. I have another friend who will cry with me. I have another friend who will do the oppression Olympics and be like, oh, you had a trauma? Ha, I had 2 traumas. And then I have that friend that'll listen. So when we're seeking support, it's going to be super important to know what resources to tap into, right? So one thing I want you to get in your mind is get in the habit of asking yourself, what do I need right now? What do I need right now? And that could be any one of the senses. What do I need right now? I probably need a break. I need to eat. I need some water. I need to laugh. Really knowing what you need so that you know which resource to lean into. I have somebody I work with who was going through something, and she called a friend, and before she knew it, she was kind of counseling the friend. And I asked her, she asked herself that question. She said, I didn't ask. I just kind of reached out to the first person I could think of. You got to know what you need before, so you can ask for it. If we're going into situations and we don't know what we need, how is that person supposed to provide it for us? That's super important. I was talking to my brother one time, and he was complaining about whatever. And I went right in, and he said, Jelana, I'm going to stop you. I don't want to hear your infinite wisdom right now. I just want you to listen. And at first I was like, watch your tone now, watch the tone. But then I had to be respectful of, like, he needed to be heard and validated in that moment. So really being able to ask for what that looks like. And that could be physical touch as well. Do you need a hug? Do you need to be physically close to someone? Be paying attention to that. Or do you need people to stay away? I have my little godson. He was 6 at the time. And I said, come on here, boy, give me a hug. He said, oh, no need. And I was like, oh, I took it as offense. But then I said, wait a minute. He's expressing the fact that he is not right now in need of physical touch. So it's paying attention to what it is that you need right now. Do I need to be alone? Sometimes we need to be alone and we call people around, and then we're even more overwhelmed than we were at the beginning. So tapping into what do I need right now? I probably say that about 5 times to myself throughout the day. What do you need right now? I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes emotions seemingly come out of nowhere and I can't attach them to anything. So when I can't attach my emotions to some circumstance, I say to myself, Jalan, what is it that you need right now? And it could be getting up and sitting on my porch. It could be anything, but being able to answer that question for yourself is going to be super important for you to seek support, because unfortunately, and probably fortunately sometimes, people are not mind readers. So they don't know what it is that you need. So asking for what it is that you need, and also respecting the fact that sometimes people are not capable, right, of giving you what you need, and not being upset with them because of that. Make sure you're asking someone who is capable of filling that need for you, or else you're going to kind of add in the disappointment on top of the need not being met. Has anybody been able to kind of tap into that? Maybe not with those words, but tap into what do I need before seeking support?
I have 5 best friends. I was beyond blessed. 5 best friends. 1 is a male, 4 are females with different personalities. Common goal, we love each other. And there are 3 other 5 that especially when I was in my silent, the shutdown mode, they used to say, okay, I'm going to give you 2 days and I'm coming in to get you. Other people just said she's like that. I could be the life of the party or total silence. I'm coming to get you. And now with that, because of their personalities, I know what I need and I go get what I need from each and one of them. Now they may tell me something I don't want to hear.
Yep.
That's a trusted space that I can hear it. And then there's times where I just need to be alone to process it by myself. And I'm not afraid to ask for help anymore. I say, look, I don't want you to judge me. I just want you to hear me. And and it's a shared experience. They do the same thing to me. So it's those trusted spaces where I allow people in my circle. And it doesn't have to be said. It's kind of just almost it is what it is. We kind of know each other. And then I have one of my children. My youngest daughter is 24. She just gets me. My daughter's 32. She's like, look, tough, whatever. My 24-year-old, she just gets me. And that's one of those things, generational things I broke down. Like, I'm not afraid to be vulnerable to her. And she does the same thing with me. And then there are times I'm like, she's acting, I'm mom, you're the daughter. But that's that I have that inside of her. I can give that to her. She can give it to me, and there's no judgment. Why are you doing it? You know what I'm saying? Like, I never thought I could have that as a daughter and be that as a mother. So I have all 6 children. She's that person that I can deposit in. She can deposit in me. So I found that in friendship, and I found that in one of my children.
Absolutely. To know what that looks like with close people to you. And also too with self-soothe, right? Self-care is another buzzword. But one thing I've noticed is that if we grew up in an environment where emotions were invalidated and silenced, we often did not learn how to self-soothe, which is something we read in books, but I'm sure we also experience that of, if I'm not expressing my emotion, I have nothing to soothe, right? So learning what works for you. And with self-soothe, you're going to try to find something from the 5 different senses to be able to do that for you. So a self-soothe visually, could be flowers. I buy flowers every week. They make me happy in my house. As far as smell goes, I have a candle burning, or I love the lotions. Taste. I got a little problem with chocolate. I'm working on it. But chocolate for taste, right? Listen, music. I love music. I'm always singing and humming around the place. Touch, right? Furry things. I have a fleece blanket I've had since I was 17. It calms my mood. So knowing what is self-soothe for you with the 5 senses, and anything you can find that soothes more than one sense at the same time is really, really going to help you if you're in an emotional space. I have one person that I work with, and she kind of came into a session with her blanket. And she's like, please don't judge me, but I'm kind of anxious right now, and this is helping me. No judgment. Whatever works for you is what works for you, but know what works for you before you enter in a space where you're highly emotional. So you want to try these things on at about a 2 out of 10 to see what works for you. So as soon as the emotions go up, you're leaning right into whatever works for you. Something simple like cold versus hot. Does tea soothe you, or does ice cold water soothe you? What does that look like? So figuring out what with the 5 senses are going to be able to soothe you when your emotions are increased. So that is another piece of the support, is the self-soothe. And another way to self-soothe is to cry. And that's kind of where we started this morning, is talking about crying and allowing that space to cry. Sometimes the answer to what do I need right now is to cry. And that's okay. And, we say crying is not a source of weakness, but then in our own internal struggle, even crying, every time someone cries in my session, they apologize to me as if there's something to be sorry about for having an emotion that comes from our body, right? So sometimes the coping is the crying. Some of my folks I work with, they'll come to me and say, I have this emotional block. I just feel numb. I'll say, when's the last time you cried? Because that is the release of all the things living in the body. And if the mind, body, spirit go together, if we don't release that, then it kind of sits with us. And I gave you all the example of, somebody seeing their mom cry once in 35 years. So allow yourself to cry. And sometimes you need a good, ugly cry. Those cries, they're like dramatic ones from like the TV shows where the tears are coming and the hand is up on the head. Sometimes you need a dramatic cry, but allowing yourself the room to do that, right? And also not staying in that space. Putting boundaries around expressing that, because you don't want it to seep into when you need to be doing. You want to make sure that that's coming out as a part of your being, because crying is a very natural way to express feelings, both when you're very, very happy and when you're sad as well. So I know I talked earlier about a mindful mantra. And what that means is I want you to get into the habit of dropping back into your body, because what happens when our nervous systems are going, we are not present. A lot of times we are focusing on other things, dropping back into your body. So my mindful mantra is, Jalon, where are you right now? Because my body can be here and my mind is on the beach in Jamaica, especially with this weather we're having today. My mind is in Jamaica. Jalon, where are you right now? Dropping back into your body with your mindful mantra, and making sure you say it a couple times a day, because you'll start to notice that a lot of what we're doing is coping, and a lot of what we're doing is managing, and a lot of what we're doing is going on E, but we're not dropping back into our bodies and checking in with our physical selves. So having a mindful mantra, that might work. Does anybody have one, or one they might want to try on kind of moving forward? Okay, make sure you have that. Another piece also is affirmations. I say affirmations every morning because, like someone was saying earlier, I don't even open my eyes. Before I even open my eyes, that reel of information starts going, right? So dropping back into my affirmations are, may I be at peace, may I be wise, may I be healthy, may I be present, right? Saying those a couple times a day when I'm in the shower. So I'm saying my affirmations. I'm also using skills that cover a couple different senses. So there's touch and there's smell, plus my affirmations to really ground me into my body before I get my day started. And affirmations too, I think having words all over the house that are positive, having things that you can look at that are positive. I have a sign on the wall that says, everything you've ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And I keep that, sorry about that. I keep that on my wall in my office, and it's something that I think about often, right? Another sign on my wall says, you can't let go of what you can't change. So just having things around that you can look at, even in your phone, having something that goes off at the same time every day to remind you your affirmations of where your energy is going, where the thought process is going, is going to be super important. Another thing I talked about was having your boundary phrase, right? Because with folks, you're going to have to say things over and over, say things more than one time. Unfortunately, I'm not available for that. No, I'm not interested. I'm available from 10 to 5. Having those things ready so that you don't have to search your mind. Because one thing I know about healers and givers, there's some anxiety that comes up with setting boundaries. So if you have your language together, then that's really helpful. Somebody said they like the Serenity Prayer. Absolutely. If it works for you, it works for you. And it's super important to know what works for you. Sometimes things that work for other people don't work for you. I talk a lot about gratitude because whenever I'm having one of my things, right, in my magical mind, I like to shift to the things I'm grateful for because they have equal weight to the things that I want to change. But one of the folks I work with says she doesn't like gratitude. So she created a non-gratitude journal. Whatever. She didn't like the word gratitude, so she has a non-gratitude journal. It works for her. So whatever language that works for you to remind you to drop into your body and to remind you what is important. Deep breathing and a brief meditation. Absolutely. Breathing is free. Meditation is free, and you can do it anywhere. That's why it's one of the skills I always recommend. And I have moms tell me, I don't have any time. I get up, I go to work, I come home. You can be meditating on your ride to work. Your ride to work and your ride home is a transitional period that you can be putting these skills into. You know, what are you listening to while you're in that transitional period? I had one mom lie to her kids, and say she's going to the supermarket so she can go park in the supermarket parking lot and cry for 30 minutes. That's what she had to do. It's all about utilizing your space and your time to make sure that you're managing your emotions in a way that's meaningful to kind of cope through this conundrum that we're in. And I know the world is opening. Thou and I are one. I like that one. Absolutely. And if your affirmations can bring some of your spiritual practices into it, even better, because now you're tapping into two different parts of yourself. And we know that the world is opening back up, right? In May, things are opening back up. I'm hearing no masks are necessary in some places. So really, really making sure we're grounded before we kind of enter back into the rat race that is normal, right? And paying attention to what that looks like. And also making sure we're saying our affirmations and setting our boundaries, because now everybody's like, oh, we're going out. You want to go here? You want to go there? And I'm like, actually, I'm only available at this time during this day. My boundaries are going to stay in place around that because I realize that that's what I need for my own health. So making sure you have those things. I don't know if anybody talks to themselves. I know I do. But sometimes having a conversation in the mirror of, I'm going to have a great day today. Thank you for being present. I recently went through a really, really tough time and I had to tell myself, whatever part of you that was still functioning, thank you. Because I wasn't even grounded. I wasn't living in my body. So thank you, body. You kept me going. So having those words to give to yourself, because it's important to have that relationship with you and what works and what helps you keep going. Language is super important. So making sure you're speaking positivity and you're speaking the things that you want into your life. That's going to be super important. And then having little things around that you can look at that'll remind you of what your goals are. What we're always trying to do is trying to ground ourselves and create, a foundation so that when we do come out into this world and be the helpers that we are, the foundation is so steady that we're able to make it through the day and be able to be present and not just manage through, but also cope and manage and working through that in a way that we're honoring all the parts of ourselves. So in our last 3 to 4 minutes, somebody shoot out an affirmation, somebody shoot out a mindful mantra, somebody shoot out what words you're willing to put around your boundaries. Let's kind of share that on our way out. All right. I hope I hear silence. I'm hoping somebody has at least have them written down. And one mantra that I have, or one boundary, that I have is, I'm not your therapist. I have to tell my friends that all the time. I'm not your therapist. That's a boundary I have to set, because I'm not going to do 8 sessions in a day and then help you navigate those spaces after I'm done. So having that boundary of, I'm not your therapist, or I'm off right now. My time is valuable. Absolutely. I have an aunt who's a nurse, and she used to say all the time, I'm not on duty. So anybody hurt yourself, don't call me. Setting those verbal boundaries with people. I need to get back to you. Absolutely. I just said that on the break to somebody who were asking me about a training. I need to get back to you. Allowing yourself the time to do that. So I'm glad everybody was here today. I'm hoping that this was somewhat helpful in our kind of coping and managing. I hope everyone has a good cry. Respect my solitude. I love that one. I hope everybody has a good cry. And I hope we're thinking about kind of mind, body, spirit in ways we can keep ourselves safe in those ways, and making sure people around us know what's going on. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. And also just want to mention my little pitch here. I have recently been approved to offer CEUs for DBT training. So if anybody's interested, or your agency might be interested, you can give me a call. I am at firstname@gmail.com. So JalanAgnew@gmail.com. And I do custom workshops and trainings as well, if anybody needs one for themselves. Or workshops. I did a workshop for somebody's birthday. She had her and a bunch of her friends, and we kind of did a healing grounding workshop. So I am around. I am so glad I was here. Gratitude for everybody who's here and participated. And I hope to see you all at one of my trainings and workshops. Thank you.